Welcome. While everything comes on, welcome to Bridges Live Presents You Be the Judge. And I'm Dr. Paul Dyer, and my other two beautiful co-hosts is Marylin Pierre, who's running for Circuit Court Judge in Montgomery County, and Judge Claudia Barber. Judge Claudia Barber will be with us sooner or later, but we will always move on with the show. I'd like to thank everyone who listens and comments on our show on all the different platforms that Bridges comes up, because of the podcast channel, and then we have live feeds that goes on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, I don't know, something like that. So, but the podcast I just got a notice, it goes out to 300 different podcast platforms. I thought that was I'm like, you go, Bridges Live Presents, right? And, well, we're reaching people are commenting all over the place, so now it gets line funnel into certain things. Some people listen to the shows from way back when to now. Our theme is still the same, will always be the same. We want people to get good information, have a great understanding, and hopefully that turns you to an action. Because we need you all the time, every day. We were talking off air, Marylin Pierre, who's running for Circuit Court Judge, that I reach out to people who want to make a difference, who is making a difference, and who don't know how to make a difference. So we can put all the wheels on one train so we can barrel down one track so we can make a difference as it's going forward. Because right now, until we change things, it stays the same. The system stays the same. The Nancy Pelosi has to leave. They all have to get out. They all give them a punch ticket and let these clowns, Mitch McConnell, all of them, clean house. If I had my way, I really, and I've said this off air in deaf ears, but I'm going to say this on air. If I had my way, I would clean both houses and the judicial branch, from the washing dishes person to the lawn maintenance person, all the way up, hand them a ticket and saying, thank you for your service. We're having new people. Because you keep one person that's old, who's been there for 40 years, 30 years, things seem to creep back in. It's like, well, that's not how we used to do it. Have you ever been to a company that people said, well, we didn't do it that way before? Well, this is why we are all here that's new. We're changing things. If we cannot change it, then it stays the same, just with a different paint coat. We need to change it up completely. Top down and sideways. Marylin Pierre, what are you thinking about that?
I think that's a great point, but I think we have to be cognizant of, just because you change the person doesn't mean you're going to change what needs to be done. Because sometimes you replace the person with a different face, but everything that was being done by the previous person is still being done by this person.
Well, because that's why we all here, that's why we listen, that's why we do. There's so many activist people on here, and I really, really appreciate activate. But when you activate not just yourself, bring another person on. Talk to someone you don't normally talk to and say, hey, are you voting? Will you vote? And they'll say, for who? Not for who will you vote? Let's start there. Will you vote? I haven't thought about it. And now that you mention it to them, maybe they will, because you don't want to get into contentions, arguments about who they're going to vote for or who you're going to vote for. You want them to just get to the polls. Then hopefully they'll start hearing about policy and people. Just maybe.
Well, I think it's a two-step process. You vote, and then you hold the people in office accountable, whether you voted for them or not. But I think that it's really important to vote. Otherwise, the people who are in office are less likely to, how should I say it, are less likely to give you the time of day, because if you're not going to show up at the polls, they're not really going to pay attention to you because you're not a reason why they're here.
Oh, we have Holly has her hand up. Go ahead, Holly.
Yeah, I was on a League of Women Voters Zoom meeting. It was the state league, and someone spoke about, an election judge spoke about how many people came to the polls not having a clue as to whom they were voting for.
It's tons.
I just thought that was something I would not have ever considered. And they, of course, were big champions of studying the League of Women Voters Guide. You know, so I had to share. I'll do it real quickly. I shared a story of one of my lovely neighbors coming up to me and saying that she'd gotten citizenship for the first time. She didn't want to give up her citizenship in a country that didn't have dual citizenship. She said, "Now you can tell me who to vote for." And I said, "No, not that."
Holly, I've been teaching door knocking across the country for different people, for different areas, all around. Literally, I've been to so many different states for teaching door knocking, and it always surprised me the day of election, signs everywhere, like all over every corner, all over everything. You drive down, there are signs on top of signs. It looks like signs are having babies. There are so many signs. And I'll knock on a door, and I'm like, "Hey, just want to know if you're voting today." There's voting today? And I'm like, and I usually step back. I'm a big guy. Most people don't know how big I am. But I step back, and I go, "Okay, can I come in? Do you mind if I come in? All right, I'll talk to you out here. You don't even know there's voting today?" He's like, "Nah, man, I've been so busy." And then I'll turn around, and literally maybe like 20 feet from their house at a corner, there are signs everywhere. Like this, that. I mean, I said, "What did you think those signs were for?" He goes, "Man, I don't even pay attention to that noise." And I'm just like, wow. Like it breaks my heart. It hurts.
Well, I go back to the days in Cedar Heights and Fairmont Heights where people of color got walking around money, it was called, for showing up. I don't know if you remember this, David Grogan, but I go back to the early 60s in those communities with the Congress of Racial Equality, and people just didn't know, weren't aware. Back in the days of Perrin Mitchell, and the black vote was taken for granted by the Democrats as long as people got money to vote for whatever the slate said. But in our case, in Tacoma Park, we've been showing up at the polls now for 20 years on the day of election, and we give out leaflets and put down our names, put down about 100 names of neighbors so they could see, that this is who we've picked. And, you got to do that kind of door-to-door organizing that you're doing, Dr. Dyer, and you got to show up at the polls.
Right.
Just looking at the League of Women Voters or the Apple ballot or, God forbid, the Washington Post, you're going to go with who they believe should be elected. And if you haven't been following in the metro section, if you haven't been going to meetings, your vote's going to be walking around.
Right. Thanks, Mike, for that. Is you hit that right on the head. But we're going to get right into our show. So we've been political seasons here. We have midterm elections. We have elections. We have information. We have candidates that are running. We have people that are listening. We are fortunate enough and blessed enough that people have chosen to come on You Be the Judge so we can talk to them and just talk about not just who they are, but what are they going to do? What are their policies? What are their some ideas? This is a great idea for us to meet a person, for them to get their platform out there. Marylin, you want to introduce Mr. Dave Grogan? Because you do so well, so I just figured, and you're a researcher, so you've already pulled it up.
Well, I did, but then I don't have it ready right now, so I'm sorry about that, Mr. Grogan. If you could introduce yourself, and I appreciate it. I don't know why. I guess I was so busy talking today, I didn't get around to it. Sorry.
Go ahead,
but I know
Dave.
where to find you.
And I completely understand. I know you are a candidate, so am I. So trust me, I get it. Thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Paul, for having me. And thank you all. I was listening to this discussion, and I just wanted to jump in this votive discussion. It's fascinating being a candidate, and especially in Prince George's County. And when you talk to people and realize that, like you said, Dr. Paul, that even on election day, the average person has no idea that it's even election day. And I've run for office. This is my third time running for office. And so, of course, I've knocked on a number of doors. I've talked to a number of people. And it is absolutely mind-blowing. It really is. And I know the reason why. At least I think I know the reason why. I think that many years ago, they took out civics from the schools. And so, you got decades of people who become 18 years old, graduate from high school, and they know absolutely nothing about anything about government, nothing. And then they become 21, 25, 30, 40. Now they're too ashamed to admit they don't know anything. And so they back off of it, period. I don't want to have anything to do with that versus learning. Now, I was the exact same. That's the reason why I know that. I've come from Prince George's County Public Schools. I'm from Glass Manor. Went to Oxon Hill High School, grew up in Glass Manor, and I went to Bowie State. I played football, and one of the things I realized is that sports, and I'm not sure if it's the same now, but when you're in sports, that's pretty much all you know. I mean, I didn't know anything about SGA, Alumni Association, Student Alumni. I didn't know anything about any of that when I was in college. And so it's a little bit easier for me to reach people because I know the reality, because it was me. In 2012, when I started thinking about running for the first time, I retired from the Department of Justice, the U.S. Marshal Service in 2013. I look back at where I was in 2010, 2012. I had no idea who my state senator was, my delegates, my school board, the register of wills, clerk of the court. I had no idea who they were. And when I ran for the first time, I ran against a guy by the name of Doug Peters. I had never heard of Doug Peters. And so it's made it a little easier for me. So one of the things that my campaign has always been about, there's always been an education component to my campaign. My grandmother was an educator. My mother was a scholar. I was neither, but I've always had a passion for education. And so I think the key to getting out the vote is educating people. Any chance you get, just give them any kind of nuggets. Don't overwhelm people, but give them something to think about. Give them nuggets. Now, as far as the sheriff's department, one of the many things that I think that we can do different, and I ran for sheriff in 2018, and I've been in our schools for over 35 years. I'm on speed dial with most of the guidance counselors for over 35 years, so I know how the kids operate. I enjoy kids, working with kids. And so we have a coloring book for the children, and it's called The Sheriff is Your Friend. And in that coloring book, it tells them exactly what the sheriff is. So now you have elementary school kids starting to learn now. Wow, because you all know this, from preaching to the choir, kids are sponges. They only know what we give them. They only know what they're exposed to. And so they get a coloring book like that, and they begin, okay, the sheriff, and it's something fun. And for kids can learn anything as long as they're having fun. And so a big part of community policing, which is when I'm your next sheriff, we're going to get back to real. When I say real community policing, it starts with developing law enforcement officers right from your community. And Prince George's County is very unique. I've never seen a place where we're so-called prominent, but yet when it comes to job opportunities, I've talked to the business community. It's tough for people to get businesses. It's tough to get jobs, and we live right here. It's mind-boggling to me. And in law enforcement, I can't imagine me applying to be the chief of police in Beaumont, Texas, or Boise, Idaho, or be a police officer in any of these places. They would never even consider me because they know the reality. What would I know about their culture when it comes to solving crime? Solving crime is nothing more than relationship building. When I'm the next sheriff, I told someone the other day, I said, people will be calling that office daily, wanting to turn in loved ones, wanting to help solve crime. They're going to want to do it because that's a part of it, because they trust the person. They know that, okay, if I call Dave Grogan, one, he ain't going to kill him. And then one, he's going to do things right. And so what I would like to do, and what I will do when I'm the next sheriff, we're going to develop programs that I had the benefits of. When I was a student at Bowie, I started my public safety or law enforcement career as a student. I was a stay-in-school student with the Secret Service, and I was a cooperative education student with the Department of Justice, U.S. Marshal Service, and full-time, and played football full-time. And I know those experiences that I had as a student, it still affects me today. The mentorship, when I worked for the Secret Service, I used to work for the director, and he was just so proud of me. And everywhere we went, he introduced me as his future agent. And it just, as a young student, can you imagine how that made me feel? Like every time the president would leave, he would come and get me, like I was his right-hand man. And he had a photographic memory. Unlike myself, I was fascinated about that because my memory is not that great. But he knew every name of anybody that he crossed, and he would always introduce me. And it just did something to me. And so, and then that was like a family. And then it was the same thing with the Marshal Service. When I was with the Marshal Service, I was a student. I learned all of those administrative jobs, and to the point where when people needed leave, I could fill in any of those jobs, admin jobs that has different government titles to them. And so I know what happens with young people when we give them opportunities and we create opportunities. We all know that there's a direct correlation between lack of opportunity and crime and poverty. And so I envision cooperative education programs, internship programs, stay-in-school programs that are for Prince George's County residents. Imagine if I go to D.C., if I wanted a job in D.C. right now, to get through Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton and Muriel Bowser, they would never even consider me, and I worked my whole career in D.C. And so we have to create these opportunities for our young people. And in law enforcement, we can do it. We can also do things different. When you have law enforcement people who are trained properly, they have the right mentorship, they understand escalation and de-escalation of force is not rocket science. It's common sense. And when you have people that are well-trained and people who generally care, when a law enforcement officer arrives on the scene, he or she has a professional responsibility to immediately de-escalate. But what we're seeing now, these officers are showing up. One, they're scared because they're not properly trained and they weren't properly vetted. And so they're scared, first of all. And so they don't even understand the basics of de-escalating. Sometimes de-escalating could mean back off. You do a traffic stop and you stopping the person because the tail light is out and things are starting to escalate for whatever reason. It's just a tail light. It's nothing wrong with saying, okay, let him go. I've got his tag or her tag number. But instead, we want to be so aggressive because we have this mindset like us against them. No, sometimes it's best to just back off. It's not like, when you go after somebody that's escaped a felon, some mass murder that escaped from a prison or something, it's different. When as the marshals, we go after those type of people. I've locked up some of the most dangerous people on this planet. Now, it's different with them because of the nature. Someone this person has killed or raped somebody, and now they've escaped from a prison. And so now, we got eyes on them, so we got to do whatever it takes to make sure we get them. But a traffic stop ending up in death should never happen. And so that's one of the things that I think is very important. And I also think with the rise in crime right now, I think that the Sheriff's Department has to have a broader visibility. Many people ask me every day, well, what is the role of the sheriff? What's the difference between the sheriff and the police? Let me just answer that right now. The sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer for the county. The Sheriff's Department is the law enforcement arm of the courts. Now, the Sheriff's Department is also a law enforcement agency with full law enforcement authority. And so I think I mentioned last time, the Sheriff's Department, deputy sheriffs can do police work. Police cannot do deputy sheriff work. And so I think that during these times when crime is at the level that they are and they're rising, it's just getting, out of control. I live in Bowie and I'm in an next door app, and Bowie, our crime is just just out of control. We've got to be more visible. We've got to have a much more visible presence, much more security. I'm not saying aggressive policing, again, a much more visible presence in our communities, because visibility is half the battle of dealing with criminality. people are committing crimes because now they have no respect for law enforcement. They have no respect for our elected officials, and they don't even see law enforcement. So now it's open doors. And so we have to be more visible. And so that is one of the things I intend to do when I'm the next sheriff. Also, the vetting. I think the vetting is critical. We're giving people uniforms, sponsoring people, government uniforms, lethal, deadly weapons, and law enforcement authority who have not been properly vetted and trained. This is a job that is very dangerous, and it takes a special skill set, basic skill set. You can't train someone. You just can't train anyone to be a police officer. This is like being a teacher. I was a substitute teacher when I retired, and I realized very quickly that this is a job that's not for me at my age, maybe when I was younger. And I used to joke with those teachers, and I would tell them, man, this job is much tougher than my law enforcement job, because at my age, I didn't have the tolerance, nor did I have the skill set to be an effective teacher. And so it's the same thing with law enforcement. When we recruit law enforcement officers, we have to vet them properly and make sure that we have people that have basic good moral character. See, on the federal level, that's the purpose of background investigation. That's the purpose of clearances, secret clearance, top secret clearances, these different things, because we want to make sure that you have the basics when it comes to moral character. But on local and state level, there's very little vetting. I mean, certainly they don't have clearances. My security officers, go through much more vetting than the guys that are uniformed police officers. So we have to just do different with that. And so that's one of the other things that I will definitely be taking a look at when I'm the next sheriff. But anyway, let me stop right there because I could talk for years. And so I know you all, may have some questions.
So Dave, let's get rid of the elephant in the room.
Really? Actually, before we start the questions, because I do have your bio up, and I find it so fascinating, and I think it will be very helpful before we start the questioning. I'm hoping I could read it.
Go ahead, Marylin.
So sorry about not having it ready before. But Dave Grogan is an avid civil, human, and children's rights advocate. He is a graduate of Oxon Hill High School and Bowie State University, where he was a stellar student athlete as a football player. Immediately following his high school graduation, Dave traveled to Parris Island to join the United States Marine Corps, where he served 6 years as an active reservist. He is a very proud United States Marine veteran. And I have to stop right there and say, well, thank you for your service, but we have 2 Army veterans here, and so you know what we're partial to. Let me continue. While in college, Dave majored in sociology with a minor in criminal justice. He began a federal law enforcement career while serving as a BSU cooperative education student, or COOP. Dave also served as a, quote, stay-in-school student, close quote, with the United States Secret Service. Dave began recruiting students for both federal law enforcement agencies as a student and continues 30-plus years later. He currently also informally recruits corporate security professionals. During his law enforcement career, Dave was one of the managerial facilitators of the Elite Federal Witness Protection Program, which also encompassed presidential, executive, and dignitary protection. He has successfully vetted hundreds of mafias and their family members. David was also the supervisor of the exclusive Capital Area Regional Fugitive Task Force during the latter years of his law enforcement career. Dave has managed local, state, and federal law enforcement agents, local, state, and federal law enforcement agents and officers. After 25 years of distinguished service, Dave retired in June 2013 from the Department of Justice United States Marshal Service as a supervisory deputy United States Marshal. Post-retirement, Dave immediately began a second career in corporate security, which he is well established as a corporate security professional managing numerous nearly $100 million Armed Protective Service officer federal government contracts. Dave also has an extensive background in mental health, where he served as the Vice President for Government Relations or Interdynamics Incorporated, which is a behavioral health firm in Prince George's County, Maryland. Dave is a diehard civil and human rights advocate, most notably the named plaintiff in a $300 million race discrimination case against the Department of Justice's United Marshals Service. Dave is an outspoken law enforcement and public safety expert. Thank you very much, Dave, for joining us. We really appreciate it.
You know,
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Before I want to ask my question, and I want to, for us, because it just happened. It's part of who we are. You be the judge. We do talk about things that just happened. We do talk about past things that still hasn't cleared. There was a young man who recently got killed this weekend on a no-knock warrant in Minneapolis. Our hearts and prayers go out to all those families who are suffering, and so many people who have lost lives on the behests of non-trained well people. And that's really what I'm going to do, because I know many police officers around the world and country, and it comes out to be the same. Well-trained officers never get into a fight. Well-trained officers never have to really pull their trigger. Well-trained officers don't have to shoot people because of their tactics and their abilities. And I'll leave it at that. But since it is the large elephant in the room, Dave, is that this no-knock warrant, and now that's out there, it hurts us to understand and not understand what happened. And this is a lot of information that you don't know. But I'll ask you this question. If a person comes in and knocks on my door, and I'll use my door, and with a no-knock warrant looking for my cousin, because that's what happened in Minneapolis, and they come in through my door, that's the wrong door to go through, because you're not coming out the other side unless it's in a body bag. And that is not a threat. I'm just that talented. Now, the question I have, what do you surmise? Do you think I would be brought up on a charge if I did that to the officers that came through and put them all down? What do you think how that would go?
Dr. Paul, that's such a great question. And I'll tell you, I am probably embarrassed to say this. I had never heard of a no-knock warrant until recently with these things. And I have managed warrant squads, fugitive operations, and managed law enforcement all over the world. I had never heard of a no-knock warrant. Our training as federal officers or federal agents is a lot different than local. As you pointed out, and you're so correct, let me be very clear. I have never shot anyone. No one under my leadership has ever shot anyone. I have never had any complaints lodged against me. No one who's ever worked for me has ever had any complaints lodged against them. And I've been in management 23 out of my 25 years in law enforcement. And so the way the media tries to sensationalize things and almost justify things that are just foolish. Everything you said, Dr. Paul, is right on point. You're paid to be skilled at preventing things from happening. And so shooting and those types of things and any type of deadly force is something that will be done as a complete last resort. But to your point, Dr. Paul, I feel you on exactly what you're saying. If somebody comes in your house, no knock. See, we're trained. The purpose of the knock, when federal people come in, we're going to knock 3 times when we're trained. You're going to knock 3 times. You're going to have paraphernalia. You're going to have stuff all over you. Police, U.S. Marshals. The term police means the same anywhere around the world. So no matter where you go, anybody knows. You don't go say U.S. Marshal, but who knows what that is? So you're going to have things that's going to say police all over you. You're going to knock 3 times, and you're going to knock simply because if you don't, Dr. Paul, if you do exactly what you said, in my mind, you're justified. You're absolutely justified. Why would somebody come in your house? I mean, because as far as you're concerned, this is a robbery. I mean, this isn't a potential extortion. You don't know what this is. So to protect your family and protect your life, you're absolutely right. The no-knock warrants, I don't know that must be a local or a local law enforcement thing, because I know federally we spend countless hours in training, because the federal government is all about, it's about making sure you don't embarrass government. I mean, when you're a federal law enforcement officer, the actions that we take impact the White House. And so we have to be trained at a level that we're not doing anything ridiculous, run up in somebody's house without knocking. Anybody with good sense would know that doesn't make sense at all.
Thank you, Dave. Anyone have any questions for Dave at all? Go ahead, Mike, please.
Well, my question is about white racist cops. And I realize the example I gave earlier might have gone over your head, but in the 60s in Prince George's County, walking around money meant money being given to people of color to vote for the right candidates. Yeah. So that's why I use that reference. But back in the day, and I have to say, again, with me, it was a badge of honor, but I did get arrested at Glass Manor because it was all white and it was racist, and they would not allow in 1966 returning Black Marines from Vietnam to rent at Glass Manor. More at the second interesting connection is Bel Air at Bowie. So again, I was arrested for sitting in there because it was a Levitt segregated facility. So in both of those cases, the cops were Prince George's County cops. Yeah, they were all white, and they were horrible. I mean, they were the worst. I mean, their parents must have all been members of the Ku Klux Klan or something. But I never quite, even in the South, seen racism approaching Prince George's County white police. Yeah, and I've spent, unfortunately, the night in Upper Marlboro, and again, it was not good treatment. So maybe things have changed, but is there any impact that you could have, if elected, on the racism of the police in Prince, or is that past? Is that no longer an issue?
No, it's still an issue. I think that we're in the process of trying to clean it up. But as you mentioned, and you've got a long, rich history, but the police department has always been, and it wasn't that long ago, as you know, blacks couldn't even come in the areas of Prince George's County. Now, when you talk about paying people for votes, believe it or not, that still is happening, but it's at a much more sophisticated level. Elected officials, we still have outside people who control our elections. And so, and the way they control them is certain people are paid X amount of money to get elected. And there's monies poured into candidates that they know that they can control. They'll still have control over the county. So it's terrible in the 21st century. It's still, some people call it plantation politics in Prince George's County. Wow. And so that hadn't changed. It's just different faces, and they're just handpicking certain blacks. You know, we realize that blacks have to be elected, so let's just get the ones we want, the ones we know we can totally control. And so that, we call that the machine. My campaign we started was called the Combine. We're combining people from the community. We're coming together as one community to take on the machine.
Thank you. That's plantation politics. I wrote it down, and it hurts. It's a fact, but it just hurts. So anyone else have any questions that comes off? What is the one thing you notice, not in just campaigning, but to be a black sheriff in a town that's had plantation politics? Are you trying to change minds? Are you trying to change hearts?
I think you have to change both. And getting back to Mike's, let me just say this, Mike, going back to your question, please understand, you all, law enforcement people only do what they're allowed to do. And so when you see civil rights violations and different things like that, that's because they're allowed to do that. when I used to run the Capital Area Fugitive Task Force, I had racist whites that worked for me. And these guys, they enjoyed tracking down blacks. And so some of these guys were so racist, they didn't even speak to me, which was fine, as long as they did their job. But they knew I had a zero tolerance for civil and human rights violations. They knew that. And so warrants and fugitive hunting is like the elite in that world. When you're doing that, when you're hunting down fugitives, you've arrived federally. And so me being the manager of that, they never wanted to lose that opportunity. And so when I, as a sheriff, the chief of police, they set the tone. They set the tone. And people don't realize that. Just like Dr. Paul, if you were the chief of police or sheriff anywhere, the people would already know what you stand for. And nobody's going to play games with you. But what happens, and I'm not sure if you all realize this, I'm only going to speak for law enforcement. But what happens in law enforcement is there are certain blacks that are put in positions simply because they know that they're manageable and controllable. And then you put these people in positions, and then all you do is make them feel good about themselves. I've watched this for 25 years. Tell them how nice their suit is and how cool they are. Go drink cigars, drink with them, smoke cigars with them. Meanwhile, wreak havoc in the community. So when you have the right person in place, they already know what you stand for. And then there's a fear factor. And that's why I use you, Dr. Paul, as an example. See, right off the bat, the people are going to be afraid of you, first of all. So they're going to be afraid not to do right. And then they're going to already know that you're not somebody with low self-esteem that needs to be patted on your back. You're going to be looking for them to do their job. You can pat me on my back and tell me how great I am as long as you do your job. And you don't do anything outside of that, we're fine. And so the managers set the tone. The leader, not ground managers. I'm talking about way at the top.
Do you because you're a Marine, that's so many strikes against you of even becoming a sheriff. I mean, I first of all, I don't even know. I mean, we're talking about the training. So, but the truth be told, here's this: as you're running, there's police issues going around. They don't specify sheriff, police, marshal. They just say police. Do you have to go around clarifying the difference, or do you just feel like answering those questions like police accountability boards or the prisoner pipeline? All those questions are a part about the police and law enforcement. You get hit with all that.
I think it's important again, and from an educational piece, is that. See, the sheriff's department runs under the radar because the average person don't even know the sheriff is the police. And so you got the sheriff's department over here doing anything they want because there's no accountability. One, the average person has no idea who the sheriff is, first of all. They don't know who the sheriff is. So how can you hold someone accountable if you have no idea who that person is? And so then, to your point, when I hear all this police, see, in our minds, when we know these structures, we know police means sheriff, police mean marshals, Secret Service, ATF, every police. But to the average person, when they think police, they generally just think county police or local police. And so I think it's important that any chance I get, like I said, there's always an educational component to my campaign.
I have a question. Mm-hmm. Well, Sheriff candidate Grogan. Many times people say that they are going to go into the system because they want to change it. And sometimes the system changes them. And I don't think you are going to be one of these people. But how do you think that you are going to stop from being one of these people? How are you going to change the system instead of the system changing you?
Yeah, that's a great question, Judge. I don't think that one person can change a system. I don't think that, and certainly I'm not going to be able to change a system. But what I know I can do is improve, and we can improve in a system. We can improve a system, and I envision myself being a game changer, and us having a model law enforcement agency that will resonate across not just the county, the state, but across the country. And that's not going to be difficult because those of us, like Dr. Paul mentioned, those good law enforcement officers, those ones that have those skill sets, those are the ones that we're going to be attracting. And when you have a good law enforcement officer, people appreciate that. And over time, that's going to change the system. And then also, if you put some mechanisms in place, one of the reasons why we have issues in law enforcement, there's no accountability. And so under my administration, I am going to have an office of a professional responsibility. And what that office is going to be is like a quality assurance, because if you ever look at any major corporation, you look at Verizon and Google and all these, they always have some kind of quality assurance because they want to make sure that their employees are operating at a certain level. And we can do the same thing in law enforcement. We can do the exact same thing. If anyone has a run-in, especially some use of force run-in, imagine, that somebody later come back and send them, to a survey. How was what was your experience, that kind of thing. And when you put those things in place, it's almost like wearing body cameras. Now you have an oversight that law enforcement has never had before. Law enforcement officers, they get that badge and gun and they leave out as if they're God, untouchable.
We used to have a joke growing up that you don't run away from a fat cop. and the reason why is because a fat cop will shoot you.
Absolutely.
And now, if a cop looked like in shape, we may hit the fences and be gone, right? Because they might just give you chase. But a fat cop, a sloppy cop, if they say stop, you better. It's freeze time because they haven't ran. They pull their trigger easier, and most people don't know We're in Zoom. I understand it. And throughout the country, we're on podcasts. And thank everyone for listening to You Be the Judge. Now, I'll give you, and I know Dave. So I'll be open and honest about that. I like this man. I like him as a man. Him running for sheriff is just another thing. But this man has so much great integrity and his honor and his respect for the uniforms he has worn all came with the same honor and respect. Here's the thing. Also, you guys cannot tell by this jacket and this silly bow tie for Prince George's County or Maryland. It's ridiculous, but he's all Maryland. This brother's in shape. I'll tell you right now. He is a muscular, in shape person. And it does not do well on TV, but you've been powerlifting, you bodybuilding, you are in one put together man. And that also brings a presence on you, right? Your officers that you may end up taking over are not going to look like you. You know how I know? I've seen them. Right? I've also seen them shoot at a range. They scare me, right?
I'm sure.
They just do. And I'm a shooter. Most people get into the police force or any law enforcement, they do it for whatever reason. But they're not shooters and tacticians. They're just not good at their trade. Unlike a chef, you cannot find a good chef. You cannot find a chef who does not know how to handle his materials and know how to cook. Now, there's police officer, nice people, very smart, all of that. They can pass a test, but they cannot shoot. They could not handle themselves on a hand-to-hand issue, which is why they shoot more often. They don't know how to do any restraints, which is why they shoot more often. They don't know how to do proper takedowns, which is why they shoot more often. You're going to be hated in this Prince George's Sheriff Department because you have some people that are just not there. So how do you correct that? Can you change that policy?
Yes. And you raised some great points. I do think that it's important. I don't know that we can change what's already in place, but it is important that law enforcement people are physically, mentally, and spiritually healthy. And that's been missing. That's an easy fix somewhat because we're going to raise the expectations. We're going to raise the standards. And so people rise to the level of expectations. Right now, the expectations are so low. And I watch it. I've been told on the campaign trail, be careful with that world. So I don't talk much about, well, sometimes I do. I talk health and wellness because it is something that I've been in my entire life since 13 years old. I competed in the first bodybuilding show at 14 years old, and I competed all over the world, powerlifting, bodybuilding. And so, no, I don't expect people to be elite athletes, but we are going to have fitness standards, fitness in total. And then the fitness standards is going to be a part of the promotional process. And the federal system, we have it like that. You know, if you apply for a promotion, you put in a package, and one of those items in that package is your fitness scores. And so we can do the same thing on a local level, but we got to crawl before we walk. And one of the things I would always say is that when we work with our young people, when they already know, because young people are like this, especially athletes, you know, they're going to want to come in. They're going to want to be able to run a mile and a half and pull up, sit ups, and that's natural for young people. But if you have no expectations of them, then yeah, they're going to walk around and then they're shooting because like Dr. Paul, they're scared. See, I've never had to fire a weapon. None of that. I've rolled up on the scene. I can only think of one time on an arrest that I don't know if I was scared, but at least concerned. I just couldn't see. It was dark in the place. But other than that, I've never encountered anybody and I'm scared. But what I see on TV, these people are scared, and that's why they're overreacting. And they're scared because they're out of shape physically and they're out of shape mentally.
You said that there is a correlation between poverty and crime. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, I said opportunity. I think that there's a correlation between lack of opportunity and crime. You know, if you hear the stories of how people end up in crime, especially urban crime, the one thing that you will hear is that, see, this is where discrimination and race discrimination comes in, especially, and not to be chauvinistic, but for black males. I mean, I'm sure Dr. Paul, if he hadn't already written a book, our world is just unimaginably difficult. You know, because even my world, with the things that Dr. Paul outlined, when you're talking about, you know, I'm somebody who go to the range and shoot a perfect score, 300 out of 300, run faster than everybody, outlift everybody, and all that kind of stuff, and then people resent you. And so and you're thinking, for me, I just want to be, like you mentioned, the chef. I just want to be the best chef I can be. And so those things end up backfiring. And so it's very difficult. So if you ever talk to young black men, they'll tell you, you know, and if you have sons and grandsons, and ask them, you know, if they're raised well, they'll tell you the world is very tough. But I always teach them, then you just got to be better. You know, I was taught early on, you just do twice as much. If one person do 20, you do 30 or 40. And so my mentality is different, but we can teach the same thing to all of our young people with the right mentorship.
But isn't that a catch? Oh, I'm sorry, Teresa, but isn't that a catch-22? You've got to be better, but then when you're better, you get resented for being better.
It's tough. It really is. And I will say this, and I have, you know, I retired in 2018, and I've been managing government contracts, as my bio said, since. And so I've been managing people all my life. And one of the things people will tell you is that one of the roles that I take on is, in law enforcement and security operations, never will you find the best people in management. The best people have decided that they don't even want to be in management. So I make sure I create an equal opportunity for everybody and create an environment, because I know that resentment is there. So if this person can write, this person is good at what they're good, they're sharp dressing, they're in shape, chances are everybody's got their knees on their necks. And so I usually come in and I have a sense of consciousness and can pick that up right away. And it is a catch-22 sometimes, but I just think that it's not going to change overnight, and you just have to, I tell young guys that you just have to be the best you can be, and just pray. Just be the best you. Don't give up. Don't give in. I tell you, when I write my book will blow your mind when I write my book someday soon.
I can't wait to read it when you write it. Okay. Teresa?
I just wanted to ask whether or not Mr. Grogan is running against Melvin High. Is Melvin High running again because he is the incumbent? He's been in there since 2010. He served 3 terms. Is he running? Are you running against the incumbent?
No, I ran against him in 2018. He is retiring this year, so it's an.
Oh, he's retiring. That's good.
Yeah, he's another thing. Yeah, it's good. I think that you know, I mean, he's a fellow Marine, but I'll be honest with you all that one of the challenges for Black males is that lack of mentorship. And so that's another one of the reasons why I take on that role. And, you know, and I have all due respect for Sheriff Hyde. But, you know, I think that if I were him in, you know, late 70s, early 80s, by now I would have mentored and developed the next sheriff. And on day one, when I'm the sheriff, that is the first thing I'm going to start working on. Who is the next sheriff? And I think that for men, that mentorship, it's not there. So I've always wanted to be that person. And I mentor a lot of young men, a lot of young people, anyone that's open to wanting to elevate themselves, because we just don't have it.
Could you also just say a few words about the Grogan Family Law Reform Act that is under review? Can you just give us a little bit of that as well?
So since I feel like I'm talking to family, I'm going to be quite candid with you all. I did an interview for Prince George's County TV when I was on the campaign trail in 2018. And it was, I guess it's live, but the producer asked me about that. And when she asked me about that, that triggered that she must have been reading a bio 10 years 10 years ago. It wasn't an updated bio. And it threw me off guard, because I wasn't expecting her to ask me about something like that. But yes, I have always been a family law reform advocate. And to the point, I think I wrote letters to the president and I wrote letters to the attorney general and everybody that I could think of. And I outlined the role that family law is playing in our communities. If any of you all have ever, and I've experienced it myself personally, have ever been in any urban courtroom and to see what happens when I tell you, the only way I can describe it is modern day lynching. And so it just completely destroys children. Obviously, when relationships don't work out, and it's not uncommon, obviously, for relationships not to work out, but when children are involved, you know, there should be a presumption of shared parenting. If one parent can prove that another parent doesn't deserve the right to have shared parenting, then that's one thing. But the presumption should be there. And right now in Maryland, we don't have that presumption of shared parenting. When relationships go bad, it's not even a matter of the mother or the father who gets the child. Whoever runs off with the child first, whoever has the child last. And I had an attorney tell me that, but David, if you want custody of the child, make sure you take her, and right before the divorce, you run off with the kid. And can you imagine a trauma that's placed on a child, and an attorney giving you advice to do something like that? It makes me sick to my stomach, to be honest with you.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome.
It's quite interesting that you not only look at the criminal aspects, but also the civil law aspects that deal with the family law issues that you talked about, because that's really important, because those kids grow up then to become adults, and their lives sometimes become part of our problems because we have to deal with some of what they were missing when they were children because they didn't get it from their parents.
I don't know the law. I don't know the law in Maryland. In Maryland, like some of the distinguished attorneys here on the panel, and you yourself, is carrying drug paraphernalia a crime? Anyone can answer that.
Well, exactly why are you asking? Because I dislike answering questions in the abstract because there's so many different.
Well, because you know this new Biden issue with giving away crack kits, the $30 million crack kit giveaway, he's championing now. So
he's giving away crack kits? Yeah. I think I need to be educated on that.
Yeah, you gotta look it up. He's giving away crack kits, like crack pipe.
I thought he wasn't. I keep reading that on my social media. He's not going to fund that.
Yeah.
But even if he did, what's wrong with that?
Well, I was wondering if having in certain areas in the United States, having paraphernalia is against the law. So when you get the kit, isn't that a crime itself?
I can't believe we're having that discussion, because the laws in this country when it comes to drugs and drug paraphernalia are so complicated.
Right.
For instance, I hear people say a lot that Maryland legalized, such and such a drug. And I'm like, no, Maryland cannot legalize it if it's a controlled substance at the federal level. And you have to educate, especially young people, because they're going around saying, hey, I could do this, I could do that. And many times they don't realize that even if it's decriminalized at the state level, it really ruins your future. Well, it really limits your future. For instance, you cannot work for the federal government if you have a positive drug test.
Right.
And so, yes, you might not, you might just get a citation if you're found with it, but it has a greater impact on your life than, not having it at all. So my advice to young people is stay away from it. And
the reason why I asked, Dave, is because if your sheriffs come up with a person that just now has this kid and they're smoking crack, now it becomes like, okay, how do you take this type of stand? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. But I'm sorry, someone else was going to say something.
Well, I think it's important. This is Veronica Wright. I think it's important to understand, the reason why harm reduction is. First of all, when we talk about harm reduction, we're talking about ways to protect drug users from overdoses. So much of the reason why harm reductionists are supporting the use of the crack pipe pass-out, which I have to look up myself because I thought Biden wasn't going to do that. But anyways, is to, make sure that it's almost like the clean needle access.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Making sure that drug users have access to clean drug pipes so that they won't just it's part of harm reduction. I hope I'm making sense.
You did. There's been harm reduction around the country. Obama did the needle thing, giving out clean needles at different clinics. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah. I did see last night on the news where they're talking. This may be along the same lines. We're talking about heroin centers where people can go and legally get heroin.
Right, the safe injection. The safe injection consumption sites.
Mm-hmm.
New York City has that.
Yeah.
Right.
Has that been effective, or what is the?
They haven't had any overdoses.
Well,
it first started in Canada.
I actually think I have a great idea. If you're going to hand out the kits, put a homing device on it. Maybe you can start tracking where they're going to buy it. Because if you're after the drug seller and you're trying to protect the drug user, then put a chip on it, and because they're going to lead you right to the supplier or suppliers.
Well, my thing is, why not regulate drugs? Why not legalize and regulate it so that you can control not only, what people get access to, but how people get access to it?
So basically, for the segment that was covered on NPR, and this was a center in New York City, you would have to come into the center to do it, and then people would have to watch you and monitor you. So you can't just go someplace else. Gotcha. So they have to monitor you and make sure that you are safe during the time that you're getting high. And the reason behind it was because so many people were dying of overdose.
Right, with the fentanyl.
Yeah, because that's a huge problem nowadays, and it's an epidemic. And I think the harm reduction and all these programs are some of the solutions to the number of deaths that have been occurring because of opioids.
Before we close out, Dave, I want people to give where they can donate to the campaign, because it does take money to run a campaign and win. You are running on Prince George's completely. This is not a Democrat-Republican like Maryland. It's not a Democrat-Republican. It's just you're running for a position. So these are these positions that just needs good people with good mindsets and good dedication. So how can people donate to your campaign, read about you, and contact you?
Absolutely. And thank you for having me. And thank you for this great discussion. This was profound. I enjoyed it. I can be found at davegrogan.com very easily, and I'll put it in the chat, davegrogan.com. If any of you all want to contact me directly, my cell is 301-651-9178, 301-651-9178, or my email address, which comes directly to me, groganforsheriff@gmail, Grogan for Sheriff. And I intend to be always accessible. I have been very intentional about my activities on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, intentionally. I think it's very important that people know who their sheriff is. So I want to thank you all for having me. Thank you, Dr. Paul, and thank you, Judge.
Thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure. We look forward to seeing you again very, very soon.
Yes, ma'am.
Does anyone have any questions? We're going to go off live air, but you can stay on and ask Dave Grogan as many questions as we can. I don't know if he's got a place to get to, but thanks everyone for listening to You Be the Judge. You can get it on all your podcast channels. You can get it on all your social medias. Just put in Bridges Live with Dr. Paul Dyer and pick up the next disc podcast. I think it's, who knows? I know how many You Be the Judges have we done, Marylin?
I know it's been well over a year.
Yeah, it's been well over a year. So we definitely have about 160 You Be the Judges easily. So thank everyone for joining us and being a part. We'll see everyone next Wednesday at 6 p.m.